The millionaire's son never talked, until he saw the new black maid do the unbelievable. For 2 years the boy remained silent, after watching his mother drown in the lake behind their mansion. No therapist, no doctor, no one could reach him. Then she arrived, a woman with her own heartbreaking past, hired to clean the rooms of a house filled with dark secrets. During a thunderstorm, she holds the frightened child and hums a simple lullaby. The boy looks up at her with wide eyes and whispers words that will change everything. Mama used to sing that too. But his sudden voice brings danger. Because what the boy saw that night by the lake wasn't an accident at all. Someone in the mansion is a killer. Someone still walking these halls, watching their every move. As the boy begins to trust and speak more, the deadly truth emerges. Will uncovering what really happened that night cost them both their lives? Or will a second chance at love rise from the depths of two shattered hearts? The morning sun was shining through the clouds as Amara Bell stepped off the bus in the upscale suburb outside Atlanta. At 27, she carried herself with quiet dignity, though her eyes held a sadness that seemed permanent. She checked the address on her phone one more time before walking up to the imposing iron gates of the Monroe estate. "This is it," she whispered to herself, adjusting the strap of her worn shoulder bag. To her fresh start, the intercom crackled as she pressed the button. "Monroe Residence," a crisp female voice answered. "I'm Amara Bell. I'm here about the live-in maid position." After a pause, the gates slowly opened. Amara walked up the long driveway, taking in the perfectly manicured lawns and gardens. The mansion loomed ahead, massive and unwelcoming despite its beauty. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, greeted her at the door. She was a thin woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're 5 minutes early," she said, checking her watch. "Good. Mr. Monroe doesn't tolerate tardiness." She led Amara through the grand entrance hall with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. Everything gleamed with wealth and privilege. "Your duties will include cleaning the east wing, laundry and some meal preparation," Mrs. Winters explained as they walked. "You'll have Sundays off, unless Mr. Monroe is entertaining. Your room is in the staff quarters." "When will I meet Mr. Monroe?" Amara asked. "He's rarely here. Always traveling for business. He's a very important man," Mrs. Winters said with pride in her voice. "His son Ethan is here with his nanny." They turned a corner, and Amara caught sight of a small boy standing alone by a window in the library. He was perfectly still, like a statue, staring out at the garden. "That's Ethan," Mrs. Winters whispered. "He doesn't speak. Not a word since his mother died 2 years ago." Amara felt her heart tighten. "What happened to his mother?" Mrs. Winters' face clouded. "Mrs. Genevieve drowned in the lake on the property. A terrible accident. The boy was there when they found her. Hasn't said a word since." Amara watched the child, so small and lonely against the backdrop of the massive window. His stillness broke something inside her. "Don't waste your time trying to talk to him," Mrs. Winters advised. "Everyone has tried. Even the best child psychologists in the country. He just stares right through you." Later that day, after unpacking her few belongings in her small but comfortable room, Amara began her duties. As she dusted the shelves in the library, she noticed Ethan was still by the window, watching raindrops begin to fall on the glass. "Hello, Ethan," she said softly. "I'm Amara." The boy didn't move or acknowledge her words. He just kept staring outside as the rain began to fall harder. Over the next few days, Amara settled into her role at the Monroe mansion. She learned the routines, the rules, and the secrets that every household holds. She noticed how the staff tiptoed around Ethan, treating him like fragile glass. His nanny, Miss Porter, was efficient but cold, checking her watch constantly during her time with him. A week after her arrival, Amara was polishing the banister of the grand staircase when the front door burst open. A tall man with dark hair and piercing blue eyes strode in, talking rapidly on his phone. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying. "Buy them out if you have to. Christopher Monroe." Even if Mrs. Winters hadn't described him in such detail, Amara would have known who he was. He had the same eyes as Ethan. He ended his call abruptly when he noticed her. "You must be the new maid." "Yes, sir." "Amara Bell," he nodded distractedly. "Where's my son?" "In the sunroom with Miss Porter, I believe." Christopher headed in that direction without another word. Amara continued her work, but she couldn't help overhearing the conversation that followed. "How is he?" Christopher asked Miss Porter. "The same, sir. No change. There was a heavy silence. "Ethan," Christopher's voice softened. "I brought you something from Japan." Silence. "It's a model airplane. We can build it together this weekend." More silence. Amara's heart ached at the awkwardness between father and son. Later, she saw Christopher working alone in his study, the model airplane parts spread out on the desk in front of him. Days turned into weeks. Christopher Monroe came and went, his visits brief and tense. Amara noticed how he tried with Ethan, bringing gifts, suggesting activities, but always met with the same silent stare. After each attempt, Christopher would retreat to his study with a tumbler of whiskey. One morning, Mrs. Winters informed Amara that Miss Porter had quit unexpectedly. "Family emergency," she said with a sniff that suggested she didn't believe it. "You'll need to keep an eye on Ethan until we find a replacement." Amara found Ethan in his playroom, surrounded by toys he never touched. She sat down on the floor near him. "I have to dust in here anyway," she said conversationally. "Do you mind if I talk while I work? My grandmother always said it makes the time go faster." Ethan didn't respond, but he watched as she began dusting the shelves. "I grew up not far from here," Amara continued. "In a much smaller house, though. My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She was the best cook in the neighborhood. Everyone wanted her sweet potato pie recipe, but she never gave it away." As she talked, she noticed Ethan's eyes following her around the room. It was the most response she'd seen from him. That evening, after Ethan was in bed, Christopher called Amara to his study. "Mrs. Winters tells me you spent the day with my son," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Yes, sir. Miss Porter had to leave. And how did he seem to you?" Amara considered her words carefully. "Lonely, sir." Christopher looked up sharply. "He has everything a child could want, except his mother," Amara said before she could stop herself. Christopher's face hardened. "We're interviewing new nannies tomorrow. Until then, you'll continue to watch him." "Yes, sir." The next day brought a fierce thunderstorm. Amara found Ethan standing in the middle of his room, staring out at the lightning with wide, frightened eyes. A particularly loud crack of thunder made him flinch. Without thinking, Amara knelt beside him and began to hum softly, a lullaby her grandmother used to sing to her when she was afraid. The simple melody filled the room, competing with the rumble of thunder. Slowly, carefully, she put her arms around the boy's small shoulders. He was stiff at first, but as she continued to hum, rocking gently back and forth, she felt him relax against her. The storm raged outside, but in that room, something was changing. Amara felt Ethan's small hand grip her sleeve. When the thunder finally began to fade, Amara stopped humming. The silence between them felt different now, not empty, but full of something new. Then Ethan turned to look directly at her, his blue eyes wide and clear. "Mama used to sing that too," he whispered. Amara froze, not sure if she had imagined the words. But Ethan was looking at her, really looking at her for the first time. "She did," Amara finally managed to say, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded solemnly. "Before the water." A chill ran down Amara's spine. "What water, Ethan?" But Ethan's face closed again and he turned back to the window. Amara's hands were shaking as she reported to Mrs. Winters what had happened. The housekeeper's eyes widened in disbelief. He spoke. "Are you certain?" "Yes," he said. "His mother used to sing the same song." Mrs. Winters pressed a hand to her chest. "Mr. Monroe must be told immediately." Christopher Monroe was in a business meeting when the call came through. He excused himself and was back at the mansion within the hour, his face a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Where is he?" he demanded as soon as he stepped through the door. "In the library with Amara," Mrs. Winters said. Christopher found them sitting together by the window. Amara was reading a picture book, and Ethan was leaning slightly against her arm, looking at the pages. "Ethan," Christopher said softly. The boy looked up at his father but remained silent. Christopher knelt down to his son's level. "Mrs. Winters told me you spoke to Miss Bell." Ethan glanced at Amara, then back at his father, but said nothing. "He may not be ready to speak again just yet," Amara said gently. "It might take time." Christopher stood up abruptly. "Miss Bell, may I speak with you privately?" In the hallway, Christopher's face was tense. What exactly happened? What did you do to make him speak? Amara explained about the thunderstorm and the lullaby. "It was just instinct," she finished. "I wasn't trying anything special. And he said his mother used to sing it." Yes, and then he mentioned before the water. I think he was referring to the accident. Christopher's face paled. What else did he say? Nothing. He went quiet again after that. Christopher ran a hand through his hair, his composure slipping. 2 years of specialists, therapists, doctors, and he speaks to you after 3 weeks. There was something in his voice. Resentment. Confusion, and beneath it all a desperate hope. I'd like you to continue spending time with Ethan, he said finally. Your other duties can be reassigned. Of course, Amara nodded. I'd be happy to. As Christopher turned to leave, Amara called after him. Mr. Monroe? I think Ethan needs his father too. Christopher stared at her for a long moment. You forget your place, Miss Bell. But later that evening, Amara saw Christopher sitting on the floor of Ethan's bedroom, the model airplane between them. Ethan wasn't speaking, but he was handing pieces to his father one by one. It was a start. The news of Ethan's brief words spread quickly through the household. Amara found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. One afternoon, as she was helping Ethan build a fort out of sofa cushions, a sleek black car pulled up the driveway. A woman stepped out, tall, blonde, and immaculately dressed in a designer suit. Victoria's here, Mrs. Winters announced, a note of warning in her voice. Victoria Monroe swept into the house like a cold wind. She air-kissed Mrs. Winters' cheek and then stopped short when she saw Amara and Ethan. So this is the miracle worker, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. I'm Victoria Monroe, Christopher's sister. Amara Bell, Amara nodded politely. Victoria turned her attention to Ethan. And how's my favorite nephew today? I hear you've been talking. Ethan pressed himself against Amara's side, his face hidden. He's still adjusting, Amara explained. He's not speaking much yet. Victoria's eyes narrowed. How interesting that he chose to speak to the help first, rather than his family. Victoria, Christopher's voice came from the doorway. I didn't know you were coming. Clearly, Victoria smiled tightly. I had to hear about Ethan's breakthrough from Susan Palmer at the club. You didn't think to call your own sister? I've been busy, Christopher said, his eyes on Ethan, who was still clinging to Amara. Victoria followed his gaze. Yes, I can see that. Perhaps we should talk privately. After they left, Amara could hear their voices rising from Christopher's study. You've given this woman too much access to Ethan, Victoria was saying. What do you even know about her? She's been thoroughly vetted, Christopher replied. And she's the only one he's responded to. And doesn't that strike you as odd? 2 years of silence, and suddenly he's talking to a maid who's been here less than a month. Amara tried not to listen, focusing instead on helping Ethan arrange the cushions. But Victoria's next words caught her attention. Have you forgotten what happened the last time you trusted someone with your family? Genevieve, enough! Christopher's voice was sharp. That has nothing to do with this. When Victoria emerged from the study, her face was composed, but her eyes were cold as they landed on Amara. I'll be watching you, Miss Bell, she said quietly. Everyone who comes into this house wants something. I wonder what you're after. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Amara returned to her room and closed the door. She took out an old photograph from her bag. A smiling baby boy with her same warm brown eyes. I miss you, Marcus, she whispered, touching the image gently. Every single day, the pain was still there, a constant ache in her chest. 2 years hadn't dulled it. Nothing ever would. But today, holding Ethan as he spoke his first words in years, she had felt something else alongside the pain, a tiny flicker of healing. As she placed the photo back in her bag, Amara heard a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Christopher standing there, his expression unreadable. I apologize for my sister, he said stiffly. Victoria can be protective. It's all right, Amara said. I understand her concern. Christopher hesitated. Would you tell me about yourself, Miss Bell? Where you're from, your background? Amara tensed. There's not much to tell. I grew up near here. Moved to Miami for a while. Now I'm back. Why did you leave Miami? The question hit too close to her pain. Personal reasons. Christopher studied her face. Ethan trusts you. I need to know if I can too. I would never hurt your son, Mr. Monroe, Amara said firmly. Never. Something in her voice must have convinced him, because Christopher nodded slowly. Good night. Miss Bell. Good night, Mr. Monroe. After he left, Amara sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling slightly. She had come to the Monroe estate looking for a quiet place to heal, to escape her past. Instead, she had stumbled into a house full of secrets, secrets that seemed to echo her own. And now a little boy who reminded her so much of what she had lost was beginning to open up to her. And his father, with his guarded eyes and wounded heart, was watching her every move. Amara looked out her window at the moonlight reflecting off the lake in the distance, the same lake where Genevieve Monroe had drowned. A shiver ran through her. She had a feeling that the healing she sought might come at a price she wasn't sure she was ready to pay. The next morning, Amara woke early. The events of the previous day still felt like a dream. Ethan speaking, Victoria's cold suspicion, and that strange moment with Christopher outside her door. She dressed quickly and headed to the kitchen to help with breakfast. Mrs. Winters was already there, directing the kitchen staff with military precision. "Good morning." "Amara," she said. Her usual stiffness softened slightly. "Mr. Monroe wants Ethan to have breakfast with him in the dining room. He asked that you bring him down." Amara nodded and went upstairs to Ethan's room. The boy was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed and staring out the window at the lake. "Good morning, Ethan," Amara said cheerfully. "Your dad wants to have breakfast with you downstairs. Shall we get you dressed?" Ethan looked at her but didn't speak. His eyes, so like his father's, seemed to be searching for something in her face. "It's okay if you don't feel like talking today," Amara said, selecting clothes from his dresser. "Some days are quiet days. My grandmother used to say that listening is just as important as speaking." As she helped him button his shirt, Ethan suddenly reached out and touched her cheek. The gesture was so unexpected that Amara froze. "You're sad inside," he whispered. Amara's heart pounded. "What makes you say that?" "I can see it," he said simply. "Like Daddy." Before she could respond, Ethan took her hand and led her toward the door, ready for breakfast. In the dining room, Christopher was reading financial reports while sipping his coffee. He looked up when they entered, his face brightening at the sight of his son. "Good morning, Ethan," he said, setting aside his papers. "Did you sleep well?" Ethan climbed into his chair but didn't answer. "Tay's not speaking much this morning," Amara explained, helping Ethan with his napkin. Christopher nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face. "That's all right. Small steps." As Amara turned to leave, Christopher called after her. "Miss Bell, please join us." Surprised, Amara hesitated. "Sir?" "If Ethan is comfortable with you, perhaps it will help him feel more at ease," Christopher explained. Though she sensed there was more to the request, throughout breakfast, Christopher made several attempts to engage Ethan in conversation. The boy ate quietly, occasionally glancing between his father and Amara. "I was thinking we could go sailing today," Christopher suggested. "The weather is perfect." Ethan's fork clattered to his plate. His face went pale. "No water," he said firmly. The first words he'd spoken in front of his father. Christopher stared at his son in amazement, then looked at Amara with gratitude and something else, a warm glimmer that made her look away quickly. "No water," Christopher agreed gently. "What would you like to do instead?" Ethan considered for a moment. Drawing it is," Christopher smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "Miss Bell, would you join us? Ethan seems to speak more freely when you're present." The morning passed pleasantly in the sunroom. Christopher cleared his schedule, ignoring calls from his office. Ethan sat between them at a small table, carefully drawing with colored pencils. He didn't speak again, but the silence was comfortable. Amara watched Christopher with his son, noticing how he struggled to connect. His love was obvious, but so was his uncertainty. "You're good with him," Christopher said quietly while Ethan was focused on his drawing. "It's like you've known him forever," Amara smiled sadly. "Children respond to patience and presence. Sometimes adults try too hard. Is that what I'm doing wrong?" Christopher asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "You're not doing anything wrong," Amara assured him. "You're here now. That matters." Christopher studied her face. "You speak from experience." It wasn't a question, and Amara felt her defenses rise. "I've worked with children before." Before Christopher could probe further, Ethan pushed his drawing toward them. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall man, a small boy, and a woman with curly hair like Amara's. "That's beautiful, Ethan," Amara said, her throat tight with emotion. Christopher touched the paper gently. "Is this us?" Ethan nodded, then pointed to another figure in the background, a woman standing by the blue scribble of the lake. "Who's that?" Christopher asked, his voice suddenly tense. Ethan didn't answer, but his eyes drifted to the window toward the lake in the distance. The moment was interrupted by Victoria's arrival. She swept into the sunroom, bringing a gust of expensive perfume with her. "Family art session?" she asked, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How sweet." Christopher straightened. "Ethan spoke again this morning." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Did he? What did he say?" "He said no water when I suggested sailing," Christopher replied. "And then he asked to draw." Victoria looked at Ethan's artwork. Interesting choice of subjects. Her gaze lingered on the figure by the lake, then shifted to Amara. "Don't you have duties to attend to, Miss Bell?" "Amara is here at my request," Christopher said firmly. Ethan responds to her. Victoria's smile tightened. "Of course. The miracle worker." She turned to her nephew. "Ethan, darling, I brought you a present." From her designer handbag, she produced a small wrapped package. Ethan took it hesitantly. "Open it," she encouraged. Inside was a silver frame with a photograph of Genevieve, beautiful, blonde, and smiling at the camera. "For your bedside table," Victoria said. "So you never forget your mother." Ethan stared at the photograph, his small face unreadable. "That's enough, Victoria," Christopher said quietly. "What?" "I thought the boy should remember his mother," Victoria replied innocently. "It's been my concern that certain people might be trying to replace her." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to Amara. "Miss Bell," Christopher said, his voice controlled, "would you take Ethan upstairs for his rest time?" Amara nodded, grateful for the excuse to leave. She took Ethan's hand and led him from the room, but not before hearing Victoria's next words. "I've been doing some checking on your new favorite employee, Christopher. Did you know she left Miami under rather mysterious circumstances?" "Right after a personal tragedy, from what I hear." Amara hurried Ethan up the stairs, her heart pounding. How much had Victoria discovered, and how would she explain it when Christopher inevitably asked? In his room, Ethan placed the framed photograph of his mother face down in a drawer. "You don't want it out?" Amara asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "She's not smiling for real." The insight surprised her. "What do you mean?" "Her eyes are scared," he said. "Like before the water." A chill ran down Amara's spine. "Ethan, what happened at the lake?" "With your mom?" Ethan crawled into bed and pulled the covers up to his chin. "Bad things," he whispered. "Can't tell." "You can tell me anything," Amara assured him, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I promise." Ethan shook his head fiercely. "She'll get mad." "Who will get mad?" "Your Aunt Victoria." Ethan just closed his eyes tightly. "Stay until I sleep?" Amara stroked his hair gently. "Of course." After Ethan fell asleep, Amara went back downstairs. She could hear Christopher and Victoria still arguing in his study. "I'm telling you, there's something not right about her," Victoria was saying. "Why would a woman with her background take a job as a maid?" "She was a teacher in Miami, for God's sake." "I'm aware of her employment history," Christopher replied calmly. "The agency did a thorough background check." "Did they tell you about her son?" Victoria demanded. Amara froze in the hallway, her blood turning to ice. "What about her son?" Christopher asked, his voice suddenly alert. "He drowned, Christopher, in a swimming pool accident, while under her care." The silence that followed was deafening. Amara leaned against the wall, fighting the wave of memories threatening to overwhelm her. Marcus's laugh, the phone call that distracted her. The splash she heard too late. She was so lost in her pain that she didn't notice Mrs. Winters approaching until the older woman touched her arm. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked with uncharacteristic gentleness. Amara nodded, unable to speak. "Come have some tea." Mrs. Winters guided her to the kitchen. "You look like you've seen a ghost." In the warm kitchen, away from the tension upstairs, Mrs. Winters placed a steaming cup in front of Amara. "I've worked in this house for 30 years, she said, sitting across from her. "I've seen how it changes people." "What do you mean?" Amara asked. Mrs. Winters sighed. "This house holds secrets, dear. It always has. Even before poor Mrs. Genevieve." "What kind of secrets?" "The kind that wealthy families bury," Mrs. Winters said cryptically. "Victoria thinks she's protecting her brother, but she's just as trapped in the past as he is." "And Ethan?" Amara asked. "That child has seen too much." Mrs. Winters shook her head sadly. "That's why his silence was a blessing in a way. Some things are too terrible for a child to speak of." Before Amara could ask more, Christopher appeared in the doorway. His face was drawn, his eyes troubled. "Miss Bell, I need to speak with you, privately." Mrs. Winters squeezed Amara's hand before leaving them alone. Christopher sat in the chair the housekeeper had vacated. For a long moment he didn't speak, just studied Amara's face. "Why didn't you tell me about your son?" he finally asked. Amara took a shaky breath. "It wasn't relevant to my employment. It's relevant to your relationship with my son," Christopher countered. "You lost a child to drowning." "My wife drowned. Ethan witnessed it. And now he's speaking to you about water." "I didn't plan any of this," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came here for a fresh start. I had no idea about the circumstances of your wife's death." "Tell me what happened," Christopher said, his tone softening. "Please." Amara stared into her tea, seeing instead the blue of that other water that other day. "His name was Marcus," she began, her voice trembling. "He was 4. We were at a friend's house for a barbecue. I was watching him in the pool. Then I got a call. My grandmother had fallen. I turned away for just a minute." She swallowed hard. "By the time I looked back, he was under the water. The tears she'd been holding back for 2 years spilled over. I tried to save him. I did everything I could, but it was too late." Christopher reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Amara looked up in surprise. "I know what it's like," he said quietly, "to replay that day over and over, wondering what you could have done differently." "You weren't there when your wife drowned," Amara said. Something flickered in Christopher's eyes. "No, but I've wondered every day since if I could have prevented it if I had been." They sat in silence, connected by their shared grief. "Victoria thinks I should let you go," Christopher finally said. Amara nodded, pulling her hand away. "I understand, but Ethan needs you," he continued. "And I think maybe you need him too." Before Amara could respond, they heard running footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face streaked with tears, his breathing panicked. "Ethan?" Christopher stood quickly. "What's wrong?" "Bad dream," Ethan gasped, running straight to Amara. "The lady in the water, she's calling me." Amara wrapped her arms around him, feeling his small body trembling against her. "It was just a dream," she soothed. "You're safe now." Christopher knelt beside them, placing a hand on his son's back. "We're both here, Ethan. You're okay." For a moment, they were exactly like the drawing Ethan had made, the 3 of them connected, supporting each other. That night, after Ethan was finally asleep again, Christopher invited Amara to join him on the terrace. The night was clear, the stars bright above them. In the distance, the lake was a black mirror reflecting the moon. "He's never come to me like that," Christopher said, staring out at the water. "When he's frightened, he always went to his mother." "He trusts you," Amara assured him. "He's just been locked in his silence for so long." "Because of what he saw," Christopher said grimly. "The police said he was asleep in the house when it happened. That Genevieve went for a late swim and got caught in weeds or had a cramp. But sometimes I wonder if he saw something else." Amara finished. Christopher nodded. "He was found by the lake, soaking wet, when the gardener discovered Genevieve's body. But he wasn't in the water. He was just watching." "Has he ever indicated that someone else was there?" Amara asked carefully. "No," Christopher sighed. "But then he hasn't spoken in 2 years." They were quiet for a moment, both lost in thought. What did Ethan mean about the lady in the water calling him? Amara finally asked. Christopher's face darkened. "I don't know. But it's not the first time he's drawn her or mentioned her in his sleep. Could it be his mother?" "Maybe." Christopher didn't sound convinced. "Genevieve was afraid of the water, though. She never swam in that lake. That's why her drowning never made sense to me. Another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit." Amara felt a growing certainty that Ethan knew more than anyone realized, and that his silence had been protecting him from a truth too terrible to speak. "Mr. Monroe," "Christopher," he corrected her. "After everything that's happened, I think we can use first names, don't you?" Amara nodded. "Christopher, I think Ethan is starting to remember what happened. And I think it scares him because of who was there." Christopher asked, his voice tense. "Or what he saw," Amara said. "Children process trauma differently than adults. Sometimes they bury the memories so deep that they can't access them, but they're still there affecting everything. Like Marcus," Christopher said softly. "Do you still see him?" "In your dreams." The question caught her off guard. "Every night," she admitted. "Smiling, laughing, alive?" Genevieve comes to me too, Christopher said, his voice dropping to a whisper. But in my dreams she's trying to tell me something. Something I can't quite hear. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and Amara felt something shift between them, a recognition, a connection deeper than employer and employee. Two broken people trying to protect a child who carried secrets too heavy for his small shoulders. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car coming up the driveway. Christopher frowned. "Victoria," he said. "She's staying the night, apparently." Amara stood up. "I should go." "It's late," Christopher caught her hand. "Amara, thank you. For what you're doing for Ethan and—" he hesitated, "for understanding." As Amara walked back to her room, she passed Victoria in the hallway. The other woman stopped, eyeing her coldly. "Still here, I see," she said. "My brother must be more taken with you than I realized." "I'm here for Ethan," Amara replied evenly. Victoria stepped closer. "Let me make something very clear, Miss Bell. The Monroes have been through enough tragedy. We don't need someone with your history, bringing more pain into this house." "I would never hurt Ethan," Amara said firmly. "Perhaps not intentionally," Victoria conceded. "But tragedy seems to follow you, doesn't it? First your son, and now you're inserting yourself into another family that's experienced a drowning. The coincidence is troubling, to say the least." Her implication hung in the air between them. "You think I had something to do with your sister-in-law's death?" Amara asked incredulously. "I wasn't even here 2 years ago." Victoria's smile was cold. "No, but you're here now, getting closer to my brother and nephew every day." "I wonder why." "Because Ethan needs me," Amara stated simply. "What Ethan needs is to be protected from people who might use him," Victoria countered. "People with their own agendas. What agenda could I possibly have?" Victoria's eyes narrowed. "The Monroe fortune is substantial. A woman alone with a tragic past. It wouldn't be the first time someone saw Christopher as a meal ticket." Amara felt her temper rising. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Victoria replied. "I know you were nearly charged with negligence in your son's death. I know you left Miami with nothing but debts. And I know a desperate woman will do desperate things." The words hit Amara like physical blows. "You have no right—" "I have every right to protect my family," Victoria cut her off. "Remember that, Miss Bell." As Victoria walked away, Amara leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. How had Victoria uncovered so much about her past? And what would she do with that information? Back in her room, Amara took out Marcus's photo again. "I'm sorry," she whispered to his smiling face. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." The guilt was always there, a weight she carried every day. But now, with Ethan beginning to speak, beginning to remember, she felt a different kind of responsibility taking shape. This child needed her, and maybe in helping him face his past, she could finally begin to make peace with her own. A soft knock at her door startled her. She quickly tucked away the photo before opening it. Ethan stood in the hallway clutching a teddy bear. "Another bad dream?" Amara asked gently. He nodded. "Can I stay with you?" "Daddy's talking with Aunt Victoria. They're being loud." Amara hesitated, knowing it was crossing a line to have the child in her room. But his small face, pinched with worry, made the decision for her. "Just for a little while," she said, letting him in. "Then I'll take you back to your room." Ethan climbed onto her bed, his teddy bear held tight against his chest. "Aunt Victoria doesn't like you," he said matter-of-factly. "She's just worried about you and your dad," Amara explained, sitting beside him. "That's what families do, they worry about each other." Ethan considered this. "Do you worry about your little boy?" Amara's breath caught. "What do you know about my little boy?" "I heard Aunt Victoria talking to Daddy. She said your little boy went to heaven in the water." Ethan's eyes were solemn. "Like my mommy." Tears sprang to Amara's eyes. "Yes, my son. His name was Marcus. And yes, I worry about him all the time, even though he's in heaven now." Ethan patted her hand. "Does it make you sad to talk about him?" "Sometimes," Amara admitted. "But sometimes it helps to remember the happy times." "Daddy never talks about Mommy," Ethan said. "It makes him too sad." He fiddled with his teddy bear's ear. "And he doesn't know everything." Amara's heart quickened. "What doesn't he know, Ethan?" Ethan looked toward the window, toward the lake outside. "About the other person." "What other person?" Amara asked carefully, but Ethan had closed up again, burying his face in his teddy bear. "I'm sleepy now." Amara wanted to press further, but she knew pushing him would only make him retreat. Instead, she tucked him in beside her. "Rest now," she said softly. "You're safe here." As Ethan drifted off to sleep, Amara stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Ethan had seen someone else at the lake the night his mother drowned. Someone he was afraid to name. And somewhere in this house, that person was still here, still close enough to keep Ethan silent with fear. The question was, who? Morning light filtered through the curtains, waking Amara. For a moment she was disoriented. Then she remembered. Ethan had come to her room after a nightmare. But now the space beside her was empty. Alarmed, she sat up quickly. Had someone found him here? Would this be the excuse Victoria needed to have her fired? Amara rushed to get dressed and hurried downstairs. In the kitchen, Mrs. Winters was preparing breakfast as usual. "Have you seen Ethan this morning?" Amara asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "He's with his father in the garden," Mrs. Winters replied, giving her a curious look. "Is something wrong?" Relief washed over Amara. "No, everything's fine. I just didn't know where he was." Through the window, she could see Christopher and Ethan walking among the rose bushes. Ethan was talking, actually talking, pointing at different flowers while Christopher listened intently, a look of wonder on his face. "Things are changing around here," Mrs. Winters observed, following Amara's gaze. "That boy hasn't set foot near that garden since his mother died. It was her special place. Did Genevieve spend a lot of time there?" Amara asked. Mrs. Winters nodded. "Hours every day. She said it was the only place in this house where she could breathe." The older woman hesitated. "She wasn't happy here, you know." "Not toward the end. Why not?" "The Monroe family has high expectations," Mrs. Winters said carefully. "Genevieve was beautiful, charming, perfect for photographs and charity events. But she wasn't born to this world. She struggled with the pressure. From Christopher, from all of them, but especially Victoria." Mrs. Winters lowered her voice. Miss Victoria never thought Genevieve was good enough for her brother. She made sure Genevieve knew it too. Before Amara could ask more questions, the back door opened. Christopher entered, smiling broadly, with Ethan at his side. "Good morning," he greeted them. "Ethan has requested pancakes for breakfast." "Blueberry ones. I can make those," Amara offered. "Actually," Christopher said, "I thought we might all go out for breakfast. There's a diner in town that makes the best pancakes in Georgia." Mrs. Winters' eyebrows shot up in surprise. "The Monroes didn't eat at diners. Is Victoria joining us?" Amara asked hesitantly. "Victoria left early this morning for a spa appointment in Atlanta," Christopher replied, and Amara couldn't help noticing the relief in his voice. An hour later, they were seated in a booth at Jenny's diner. Ethan sat next to Amara, carefully coloring the children's menu, while Christopher watched them both with a soft expression. "This is nice," he said quietly. "Normal. Don't you usually do normal things with Ethan?" Amara asked. Christopher shook his head. "Between work and everything else, I haven't been the father he deserves." "You're here now," Amara reminded him. "That's what matters." Their pancakes arrived, steam rising from the fluffy stacks. Ethan's eyes widened at the sight. "Wow," he whispered. Christopher laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed his face. Amara realized it was the first time she'd heard him laugh. As they ate, Ethan gradually became more talkative, telling them about a dream he'd had about flying. Christopher listened attentively, asking questions, drawing his son out word by word. It was like watching a flower slowly unfurl after a long winter, beautiful and fragile and miraculous. After breakfast, they walked along the town's main street, stopping to look in shop windows. In front of a toy store, Ethan pressed his face against the glass, entranced by a display of model airplanes. "Can we go in?" he asked. Of course, Christopher agreed immediately. Inside, Ethan ran from shelf to shelf, examining everything with newfound excitement. Christopher followed him, answering his questions, helping him choose a model they could build together. Amara hung back, watching them bond. This was what Ethan needed: time with his father, normal experiences away from the shadows of that mansion. As she waited, she noticed a newspaper rack near the register. The headline caught her eye. "Monroe Industries announces major expansion." Below was a photograph of Christopher shaking hands with an older man identified as Senator James Wilson. "That's yesterday's paper," the shopkeeper said, noticing her interest. "Big news for our little town. The Monroe plant will bring hundreds of jobs." "Is that Senator Wilson?" Amara asked, studying the photo. Sure is. He and the Monroes go way back, the shopkeeper replied. His daughter was best friends with Mrs. Monroe before she passed, God rest her soul. You knew Genevieve Monroe? Everyone around here knew her, the man said. Lovely woman. Always kind, always smiling. What happened to her was a tragedy. The drowning, Amara nodded. The shopkeeper leaned closer. Between you and me, there was always something fishy about that story. Mrs. Monroe was terrified of water. Wouldn't even wade in the shallows at the community pool. Strange that she'd go swimming alone at night, don't you think? Before Amara could respond, Christopher approached with Ethan, who was clutching a box containing a model airplane kit. Ready to go? Christopher asked, his eyes lingering curiously on the newspaper Amara had been reading. On the drive back to the estate, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the morning's excitement. He's speaking so much more, Christopher said, glancing at his son in the rear-view mirror. It's like he's been locked away for 2 years, and now he's finally coming back to us. Children are resilient, Amara said, but they need to feel safe before they can heal. Christopher's hands tightened on the steering wheel. And he feels safe with you. With both of us, Amara corrected him. Did you see his face when you were helping him pick out that model kit? That's what he needs, his father's attention and love. They rode in silence for a while, the countryside passing by outside the windows. The man at the store, Christopher finally said, What was he telling you about Genevieve? Amara hesitated. He mentioned that she was afraid of water, that it seemed strange she would go swimming alone at night. Christopher's jaw tightened. Everyone has their theories. The police investigated thoroughly. They ruled it an accident. Of course, Amara said quickly. I didn't mean to suggest... It's all right, Christopher sighed. I've had the same thoughts myself. Genevieve was afraid of that lake. She wouldn't go near it after dark. He paused. But the alternative is too terrible to consider. That someone was with her that night, Amara said softly. Someone Ethan saw. Christopher glanced in the rearview mirror again, making sure his son was still asleep. If that's true, why wouldn't he tell me? I'm his father. Sometimes children protect the people they love, Amara said, even from the truth. When they returned to the estate, they found Victoria waiting for them in the entrance hall. Her spa appointment had apparently been cut short. There you are, she said, her voice sharp with disapproval. Mrs. Winters told me you'd gone to town. For breakfast at a diner of all places. Ethan wanted pancakes, Christopher replied, his earlier lightness fading in his sister's presence. Victoria's gaze settled on Amara. I see you're still playing happy families with the help. That's enough, Victoria, Christopher said firmly, as Ethan stirred in his arms. Not in front of my son. Victoria's expression softened as she looked at her nephew. I'm sorry, darling. Aunt Victoria is just concerned. Why don't I take you upstairs for your nap? I brought you another present. To everyone's surprise, Ethan clung tighter to his father. I want Daddy and Amara. Victoria's face flushed. Ethan, sweetheart, Miss Bell has work to do. She's not family. She makes the bad dreams go away, Ethan insisted. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she looked from Ethan to Amara. Christopher, she said tightly, I need to speak with you privately. Later, Christopher replied, heading for the stairs with Ethan. Amara, would you join us? In Ethan's room, they settled into a comfortable routine. Christopher sat on the bed, reading a story from Ethan's favorite book, while Amara arranged the new model airplane parts on his desk for tomorrow's project. The normalcy of the scene struck Amara, how quickly she had become a part of their lives, how right it felt to be here with them, and how dangerous those feelings were. After Ethan fell asleep, Christopher gestured for Amara to follow him into the hallway. Thank you for today, he said. Seeing him like this, talking, laughing, it's more than I dared hope for. He's a wonderful boy, Amara smiled. He just needed to find his voice again. Christopher stepped closer, his eyes intent on her face. It's more than that. You've brought something into this house that's been missing for a long time, warmth, life. Amara felt her heart quicken. I should go. I'm sure Victoria is waiting to speak with you. Victoria can wait, Christopher said, his voice dropping lower. There's something I need to tell you first. Just then the door to Ethan's room creaked open. The boy stood there, rubbing his eyes. I forgot to tell you, he said sleepily. About the lady in the water. Christopher knelt down to his son's level. What about her, Ethan? She told me a secret, Ethan whispered. The night she went away. Christopher and Amara exchanged glances. What secret? Christopher asked gently. Ethan looked around nervously, then beckoned them to lean closer. She said, "Tell Daddy it wasn't an accident," but I was scared to tell. Christopher went pale. Ethan, are you saying your mother spoke to you that night? Before the accident, Ethan nodded solemnly. She was crying. She said she was going to leave and she wanted to take me with her. Leave? Christopher repeated, his voice strained. Leave where? Away from here. Away from the bad person. Ethan's lower lip trembled. But the bad person followed her to the lake. Who, Ethan? Christopher pressed, his hands gripping his son's shoulders. Who followed your mother? But Ethan shook his head fiercely. Can't tell. Not safe. You're safe now, Amara assured him, placing a calming hand on Christopher's arm. Your daddy and I will protect you. Ethan looked unconvinced. The bad person is still here. They'll hurt you too. Before they could question him further, Victoria appeared in the doorway. What's going on? She demanded. Why is the child out of bed? Ethan immediately went silent, shrinking back against Amara. He had a question about his story, Christopher covered smoothly. We were just putting him back to bed. Victoria didn't look convinced, but she stepped aside as they guided Ethan back to his bed. Sweet dreams, Amara whispered, tucking him in. Remember, you're safe now. Once Ethan was settled, the three adults moved to Christopher's study. Victoria closed the door firmly behind them. I've been patient, Christopher, she began without preamble. I've watched you grow increasingly attached to this woman, despite my concerns. But now things have gone too far. What are you talking about? Christopher asked wearily. Victoria pulled out her phone and showed them a photo. It was Amara and Ethan at the diner, sitting close together, laughing over their pancakes. One of my friends saw you this morning, Victoria explained. The Monroe heir eating in a public diner with the maid. By tonight, this will be all over town. I don't care what people say, Christopher replied. Well, you should, Victoria snapped, especially with the Wilson deal hanging in the balance. Senator Wilson is very traditional, very concerned with appearances. If he thinks your household is irregular, he might reconsider his support. The Wilson deal? Amara asked, remembering the newspaper photo. A business matter, Christopher said dismissively. It's not important right now. Not important? Victoria echoed incredulously. It's only the largest expansion in Monroe Industries' history. Thousands of jobs, millions in profits, all dependent on the senator's goodwill and regulatory support. And that matters more than my son? Christopher challenged. Victoria's expression softened. Of course not. But why can't you see that this woman is using Ethan to get close to you? To this family's fortune? That's not true, Amara protested. Victoria turned on her. Isn't it? A woman with a tragic past, desperate for a fresh start, happens to be the only one who can reach a traumatized child. It's like something out of a bad movie. You're being ridiculous, Christopher said. Am I? Victoria countered. Then why is Ethan suddenly talking about the night Genevieve died? After 2 years of silence, he just happens to remember details now that Miss Bell is here. Christopher frowned. How do you know what Ethan was saying? You weren't there, Victoria faltered momentarily. I overheard as I was coming up the stairs. Amara studied Victoria's face, noting the flicker of unease in her eyes. Something wasn't right. Ethan said someone followed Genevieve to the lake that night, Christopher said slowly. Someone he's still afraid of. Victoria's face paled. Children imagine things, Christopher, especially traumatized ones. Or they tell the truth, Amara suggested quietly. When they feel safe enough. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. And you're making him feel safe? A woman who couldn't even keep her own child safe. The cruel words hung in the air. Christopher stepped forward, his face dark with anger. That's enough, Victoria. I want you to leave. What? Victoria gasped. Leave this house now. I won't have you speaking to Amara that way. Victoria stared at her brother in shock. You're choosing her over your own family. I'm choosing my son, Christopher replied firmly, and the woman who's helping him heal. Victoria's shock gave way to cold fury. You'll regret this, Christopher. When she's taken everything from you, you'll remember I tried to warn you. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Christopher let out a long breath. I'm sorry about that. Victoria has always been protective. She's worried about you, Amara said. though she couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's concern masked something darker. "She's controlling," Christopher corrected. "She's been that way since we were children. After our parents died, she appointed herself guardian of the Munro legacy. And she didn't think Genevieve fit that legacy," Amara said. Remembering Mrs. Winter's words, Christopher's expression turned thoughtful. No, she didn't. Victoria never accepted Genevieve, no matter how hard she tried to please her. A heavy silence fell between them. Amara could sense Christopher processing Ethan's revelation, trying to make sense of it. "Do you think it's possible?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. "That Genevieve's death wasn't an accident?" "I think Ethan believes it wasn't," Amara replied carefully. "And I think he's terrified of whoever was there that night." Christopher crossed to the window, staring out at the lake shimmering in the distance. "If someone hurt her, if someone took her from us, I swear I'll make them pay." The intensity in his voice sent a chill down Amara's spine. There was so much pain in this house, so many secrets, and now she was entangled in all of it. "What will you do about Victoria?" she asked. Christopher turned back to her. "She'll cool down eventually. She always does." He hesitated. "But I meant what I said. I won't let her or anyone else interfere with Ethan's progress. Even if it means risking your business deal with Senator Wilson. Some things are more important than business," Christopher said firmly. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, Amara found herself drawn to the lake. The night was clear. Stars reflected on the dark water's surface. She tried to imagine what had happened here 2 years ago. A frightened woman, perhaps running from someone, meeting her death in these quiet waters. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said behind her. "In a dangerous way." Amara turned to find Christopher standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "I couldn't sleep," she explained. "Neither could I," he admitted, moving to stand beside her. "I keep thinking about what Ethan said, about his mother trying to leave." Christopher nodded. "I knew things weren't perfect between us. Genevieve was unhappy, restless, but I never thought she would leave. Take my son." "Maybe she was scared," Amara suggested gently. "Of what?" Christopher asked. "I never raised my voice to her, never laid a hand on her. I gave her everything." "Sometimes it's not about what someone does," Amara said. "Sometimes it's about what they don't do." Christopher looked at her questioningly. "Like not seeing when someone is drowning," Amara continued. "Not in water, but in the life around them." Understanding dawned in Christopher's eyes. "You think she felt trapped here?" "I think many people can feel trapped in a beautiful cage," Amara said. "Even one with every luxury." Christopher was quiet for a long moment. "I loved her," he finally said. "In my way. But I was so busy building the family empire that I didn't see she was breaking under its weight." The honesty in his voice touched Amara deeply. "It's not too late for Ethan," she said. "You can still be the father he needs. With your help," Christopher added, turning to face her fully. "Amara, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come into our lives. Ethan would still be locked in his silence. I would still be lost in my guilt." "You give me too much credit," Amara demurred. "No," Christopher shook his head. "I don't give you enough." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Amara knew she should step back, maintain the boundary between them. But something held her in place, the pull of his gaze, the warmth of his presence in the cool night air. "I know it's too soon," Christopher said softly. "I know there are complications, questions still to be answered, but I can't deny what I'm feeling." Amara's heart raced. "Christopher, I—" Her words were cut off by the sound of a scream from the house, high-pitched, terrified, unmistakably Ethan's. They both turned and ran toward the mansion, fear propelling them forward. Inside, they rushed up the stairs to Ethan's room where the light was already on. Mrs. Winters was there, trying to calm the hysterical child. "He woke up screaming," she explained as they entered. "Something about a face at his window." Ethan launched himself into Amara's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "She was there," he choked out. "Looking at me?" "Who, Ethan?" Christopher asked, checking the locked window. "Who did you see?" "The lady from the lake," Ethan whispered. "But she wasn't in the water. She was right there, looking in." Amara exchanged a worried glance with Christopher. The boy's room was on the second floor. No one could be at his window unless they were on a ladder. "It was just a nightmare," Amara soothed, stroking his hair. "There's no one there now." "It wasn't a dream," Ethan insisted. "She had wet hair and she was so white. She was trying to tell me something. A chill ran down Amara's spine. The description sounded like Genevieve, Christopher whispered, clearly thinking the same thing. Mrs. Winters crossed herself. Lord have mercy. There's no such thing as ghosts, Amara said firmly, though the conviction in Ethan's voice made her doubt her own words. Something else must have scared you. Ethan shook his head stubbornly. It was her. And she was pointing. Pointing at what? Christopher asked. At the lake, Ethan said, where the bad person pushed her. The room went silent. Even the night sounds outside seemed to still at the child's words. Ethan, Christopher said carefully, kneeling beside his son, are you saying someone pushed your mother into the lake? Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with fear. I saw it. From my window. Mommy was running, and the bad person was chasing her. They were fighting by the water. Then the bad person pushed her and she fell in. She tried to get out, but the bad person held her down with a stick. His voice dropped to a horrified whisper. Until the bubbles stopped. Amara felt sick. The image was too vivid, too specific to be a child's imagination. Why didn't you tell anyone before? Christopher asked, his voice shaking. The bad person saw me watching, Ethan whispered. They looked right at my window and said if I ever told, they'd do the same thing to me. Christopher pulled his son into a fierce embrace. No one will ever hurt you, Ethan, I promise you that. Who was it? Amara asked gently. Who hurt your mother? Ethan buried his face in his father's shoulder, refusing to answer. It's okay, Christopher soothed. You don't have to say it now. You're safe. Later, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep again, this time in Christopher's bed, and with Christopher watching over him, Amara met with Mrs. Winters in the kitchen. Should we call the police? Amara asked. What Ethan described, it was murder. Mrs. Winters looked troubled. After 2 years? With no evidence except a child's testimony? I don't know if they would reopen the case. But if what he's saying is true, then Genevieve's killer is still out there, Amara argued. Possibly someone close to this family. Someone Ethan is still afraid of, Mrs. Winters agreed. That narrows the possibilities considerably. Before they could discuss it further, Christopher joined them, looking exhausted. He's finally asleep, he reported. I gave him the stuffed bear he likes. What are you going to do? Amara asked. Christopher ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Call the police, I suppose, though I doubt they'll take a 6-year-old's recovered memories as evidence. We need more than Ethan's word, Mrs. Winters said pragmatically. We need proof. The autopsy report said she drowned, Christopher recalled. There were no signs of struggle, no bruises or marks indicating foul play. But if someone held her under with a stick, as Ethan described, Amara reasoned, there might not have been direct contact. The three of them sat in silence, the enormity of the situation weighing heavily. Whoever it was, Christopher finally said, they're still in our lives. Close enough that Ethan sees them regularly. Close enough to keep him terrified into silence for 2 years. The staff. Mrs. Winters suggested, most of us have been here since before the accident. Or family, Amara said quietly. Someone Ethan wouldn't want to accuse. Christopher's face darkened. Victoria has always been possessive of this family, of our legacy. She never accepted Genevieve. Surely you don't think your own sister, Mrs. Winters began, then stopped at the look on Christopher's face. I don't know what to think anymore, he admitted. But I intend to find out the truth. For Genevieve. And for Ethan. That night, unable to sleep, Amara sat by her window staring out at the moonlit grounds. The lake shimmered in the distance, beautiful and deadly. Somewhere in this house was a killer, someone who had taken a young mother's life and traumatized a child into years of silence. And somehow, Amara was now caught in the middle of it all. Her mind turned to Marcus, to her own guilt and grief. She had come here seeking peace, a chance to rebuild her shattered life. Instead, she had found another broken family, another tragedy involving water. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Christopher standing there, his face drawn with worry. I can't stop thinking about it, he said without preamble, about who could have done this to her, to us. Amara stepped aside to let him in. Have you considered that it might not be someone in the family? Maybe it was an intruder, someone from outside. Christopher shook his head. The security system was armed that night. No alarms were triggered. It had to be someone who belonged here, someone with the access code. Like Victoria, Amara said softly. Christopher's expression was pained. She's my sister. I don't want to believe she could do something so horrific, but what? Victoria was always jealous of Genevieve, of the attention she got from me, from the press, from everyone. And she was furious when I changed my will after Ethan was born, making Genevieve the trustee of his inheritance. You think Victoria would kill for money? Amara asked, shocked. Not just money, Christopher said grimly. Control. The Monroe legacy means everything to her. More than family, more than love. They were silent for a moment, the implication hanging between them. What will you do? Amara finally asked. Christopher met her gaze steadily. I'm going to talk to the detective who handled the original investigation. Privately. If there's any chance of reopening the case, of finding justice for Genevieve, I have to try. And Ethan? I won't let him be questioned again, Christopher said firmly. He's been through enough trauma. For now, I just want to keep him safe. And for that, he added, his voice softening, I need you. Their eyes met in the dim light of her room. Amara felt the weight of his trust, his need. It both frightened and moved her. I'll help in any way I can, she promised. For Ethan, Christopher agreed. Then more quietly, and for us. He reached out, his fingers gently touching her cheek. The contact sent a shiver through her. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with such tenderness. I know the timing is all wrong, Christopher murmured. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this shouldn't happen. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe again. Like there's hope after all the darkness. Amara closed her eyes, letting herself lean into his touch. Christopher, A sudden crash from downstairs interrupted them. They both froze, listening. Then came the sound of breaking glass. Stay here, Christopher ordered, already moving toward the door. Lock it behind me. But Amara was right behind him. I'm coming with you. Together they crept down the stairs toward the source of the noise, the library. The door was ajar, a light on inside. Christopher pushed the door open wider. Inside, Victoria was standing by the desk, a glass of whiskey in her hand. Another glass lay shattered on the floor. Victoria, Christopher said. What are you doing here? I thought you'd left. Victoria turned to them, her eyes taking in their proximity, the fact that they had clearly come downstairs together. A cold smile spread across her face. Well, isn't this cozy? The grieving widower and the tragic maid finding comfort in each other's arms. You're drunk, Christopher observed. And you're a fool, Victoria shot back. Did you really think I would just leave? After everything I've done for this family, Amara noticed something clutched in Victoria's other hand. A folder full of papers. What are you looking for? She asked, nodding toward the folder. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Nothing that concerns you. Family business. Christopher stepped forward. What are those papers, Victoria? Victoria held them closer to her chest. Insurance. In case you continue making poor decisions, give them to me, Christopher demanded, holding out his hand. Victoria laughed, a brittle sound. Oh, Christopher, always so commanding, so sure of your authority. But you've never been as clever as you think. What's that supposed to mean? Victoria's gaze shifted to Amara, then back to her brother. It means I know things you don't. About your precious Genevieve. About the night she died. Christopher went very still. What do you know about that night? A calculating look crossed Victoria's face. Enough to know that your son's sudden memories are nothing but fantasies. Convenient fantasies encouraged by someone with her own agenda. She looked pointedly at Amara. Ethan isn't making it up, Amara said firmly. No? Victoria challenged. A traumatized child, silent for years, suddenly remembers seeing his mother murdered. After you start whispering in his ear? It's too convenient. Why would I do that? Amara demanded. Victoria smirked. To get close to Christopher, of course. To embed yourself in this family. In this fortune. That's ridiculous, Christopher said, is it? Victoria countered. Think about it, Christopher. She appears out of nowhere, with a tragic past that mirrors your own. Within weeks, she's the only one Ethan will talk to. Now she's got him claiming his mother was murdered. And suddenly you're looking at her like she's your salvation. She shook her head. I've seen this con before. You're the one with something to hide, Amara said, a sudden certainty filling her. That's why you're so desperate to discredit me, to separate me from Ethan. You're afraid of what he might remember, of what he might say. Victoria's face hardened. Be very careful, Miss Bell. You're playing a dangerous game. Where were you the night Genevieve died? Amara asked directly. The room went silent. Christopher looked from Amara to his sister, waiting for the answer. "I was in Atlanta," Victoria said smoothly, "at a charity event. There were hundreds of witnesses." "Until what time?" Christopher pressed. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you actually questioning me?" "Your own sister?" "Answer the question, Victoria." "I left around 10. I was home by 11. And Genevieve died sometime between 11 and midnight," Christopher said, his voice hollow. "You had time." Victoria slammed her glass down on the desk. "This is absurd. I love Genevieve. She was family." "You hated her," Amara contradicted. "Everyone in this house knows it. You thought she wasn't good enough for your brother. For the Monroe name." "You know nothing about our family," Victoria hissed. "I know that Ethan is terrified of someone in this house," Amara replied steadily. "Someone who told him they'd hurt him if he ever spoke about what he saw. And I know he won't name that person, because he's still afraid." Christopher moved closer to his sister. "Victoria, if you know something about Genevieve's death, anything at all, you need to tell me now." For a moment, something like fear flashed in Victoria's eyes. Then her composure returned. "What I know," she said coldly, "is that your judgment is compromised. First by grief and now by whatever this is." She gestured dismissively at Amara. "But I won't let you destroy everything our family has built." She gathered the papers and moved toward the door. Christopher blocked her path. "What's in those files, Victoria?" "Like I said," she replied, "insurance. Against poor decisions." She tried to push past him, but Christopher grabbed her arm. The folder fell, papers spilling across the floor. Amara knelt to gather them. They were photographs, dozens of them, of Genevieve at various locations. In some, she was with a man who wasn't Christopher. "What is this?" Christopher demanded, picking up one of the photos. "You were having Genevieve followed?" Victoria's face was pale but defiant. "I was protecting you. Protecting this family. By spying on my wife?" Christopher's voice shook with anger. "She was cheating on you," Victoria snapped. "With James Wilson's son, of all people. The man whose support we need for the expansion project." Amara looked more closely at the photos. The man was young, handsome, and the body language between him and Genevieve was intimate but not romantic. They were leaning close, talking intensely, but there was no kissing, no physical contact that suggested an affair. "These don't prove anything," Amara said. "They're just having a conversation." "There are more," Victoria insisted. "More damning ones." Genevieve was planning to leave Christopher for David Wilson. She was going to take Ethan and half the Monroe fortune with her. Christopher stared at the photos in his hands. "Even if that were true, it wouldn't justify what happened to her." Victoria's eyes widened. "You can't possibly think I had anything to do with her death." "I don't know what to think anymore," Christopher said, his voice hollow. "All I know is that my son says he saw someone push his mother into that lake. Someone he's still afraid of." "Children imagine things," Victoria insisted, "especially traumatized ones." Amara noticed something in one of the photos, a familiar face in the background watching Genevieve and David Wilson. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the figure. Christopher leaned closer. "That's Robert Klein, our head of security, former police officer. Why would he be following Genevieve?" Amara asked. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "I asked him to keep an eye on her, to gather evidence, without telling me." Christopher's voice was dangerous. "You wouldn't have believed me," Victoria defended herself. "You were blind when it came to her." A terrible suspicion was forming in Amara's mind. "Mr. Klein, does he still work for the family?" "Of course," Victoria replied. "He's been with us for years." "And he has access to the house?" "To Ethan?" Christopher's face paled as he followed Amara's logic. "You think Klein?" "If he was following Genevieve that night," Amara reasoned, "if he saw something he wasn't supposed to see, or did something he wasn't supposed to do," Christopher finished grimly. Victoria shook her head frantically. "No, that's impossible. Robert is completely loyal to this family." "To which part of the family?" Amara asked pointedly. Before Victoria could respond, they heard a sound that made their blood run cold. Ethan's scream. Coming from upstairs, Christopher was the first to react, bolting for the stairs with Amara close behind. Victoria followed, her face pale with shock. They raced to Christopher's bedroom where Ethan had been sleeping. The door was open, the bed empty. "Ethan," Christopher called frantically, checking the bathroom. "The closet." "He's not here," Amara said, her heart racing with fear. Another scream echoed through the house, fainter this time. "Coming from below. The lake," Christopher whispered, his face draining of color. "He's at the lake." They rushed back downstairs and out the rear doors of the mansion. The night was clear, the full moon casting an eerie glow over the grounds. In the distance, by the shore of the lake, two figures were visible, one small, one large. "Ethan!" Christopher shouted, breaking into a run. As they drew closer, Amara could make out the second figure, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit. Robert Klein, the head of security, was holding Ethan by the arm at the water's edge. "Let him go, Klein," Christopher demanded as they approached. Klein turned, his face hard in the moonlight. "Stay back, Mr. Monroe," he warned, tightening his grip on Ethan, who was crying silently now. "This has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with me." Christopher echoed in disbelief. "That's my son." "Klein!" Victoria called, breathless from running. "What are you doing?" "Release Ethan immediately." A strange smile crossed Klein's face. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Miss Monroe." "The boy remembers too much. He's talking now." "You killed my wife," Christopher said, the pieces finally falling into place. "Victoria hired you to follow Genevieve, and you killed her." Klein laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. "Is that what you think happened?" "I saw you," Ethan sobbed suddenly. "You pushed Mommy in the water. You held her down with a stick." Klein's face darkened. "You should have kept your mouth shut, kid. Like you promised." "Let him go," Amara said, stepping forward slowly. "He's just a child." Klein's eyes fixed on her. "You're the reason for this mess. He was fine until you came along, making him talk, making him remember." "Robert," Victoria said, her voice trembling, "this isn't what I wanted. I never asked you to hurt Genevieve, didn't you?" Klein challenged. "You said she was ruining everything. Taking the boy, threatening the family fortune, the Wilson deal. You said someone had to stop her." Victoria shook her head frantically. "Not like this. I just wanted the evidence of her affair, something Christopher could use in a divorce." There was no affair, Amara realized suddenly. Those meetings with David Wilson, they weren't romantic. "They were planning something else," Christopher said, the truth dawning on him. "The expansion project. The land deals." Klein snorted. "Clever boy. Your wife was meeting with David Wilson to warn him about contamination on the proposed factory site. Toxic waste, buried decades ago by Monroe Industries. She found the old reports in your father's files." Christopher stared at him in shock. "What?" "She was going to expose everything," Klein continued. "Destroy the deal, destroy the Monroe name." And Miss Victoria couldn't have that, could she? All eyes turned to Victoria, who had gone deathly pale. "I didn't know about any contamination," she whispered. "I just thought she was having an affair, trying to take Ethan away. I wanted to protect our family, so you told Klein to stop her," Christopher said, his voice hollow. Victoria shook her head desperately. "Not like this. Never like this." "She was hysterical that night," Klein said flatly. "Running to the lake, threatening to call David Wilson to go public with the reports. I just meant to scare her, to get the files back." "But she fought back. Fell in the water. And then you held her down," Christopher said, his voice breaking. "While my son watched." Klein's grip on Ethan tightened. The boy was supposed to be asleep. But he saw everything from his window. "I made him promise to stay quiet. Told him what would happen if he didn't." "You terrorized a child," Amara said, disgust evident in her voice. "For 2 years, I protected this family," Klein insisted. "The Monroe legacy. By murdering my wife." Christopher challenged, taking another step forward. "Stay back," Klein warned, pulling Ethan closer to the water's edge. "I don't want to hurt the boy, but I will if I have to." Amara's mind raced. She could see the fear in Ethan's eyes, the same terror she'd seen in Marcus's face when he realized he was in trouble in the water. She couldn't lose another child. "Not again, Robert," she said calmly, using his first name. "Let's talk about this. There must be another way." Klein hesitated, his eyes flickering to her. "There's no other way now. The boy has talked. He's told you everything. We can figure something out," Amara continued, edging closer. "No one else has to get hurt." "Amara, be careful," Christopher warned, seeing Klein's growing agitation. Victoria stepped forward suddenly. "Robert, let the child go." "This is between us," Klein laughed bitterly. "Now you want to take responsibility? After 2 years of letting me carry this alone? What are you talking about?" Christopher demanded. "Your sister knew," Klein said, his voice hard. "She knew what happened that night. I called her right after. She told me to make it look like an accident to keep the boy quiet. Victoria's face crumpled. I was trying to protect our family name, our legacy. I never meant for Genevieve to die. But you covered it up, Christopher said, staring at his sister in horror. All this time you knew what happened to my wife and you said nothing. I couldn't lose everything, Victoria whispered. The company, the family name, it's all we have. It's all you have, Christopher corrected her. I had a wife, a mother for my son, and you took her from us. While they were talking, Amara had been slowly moving closer to Klein and Ethan. She caught the boy's eye, trying to communicate silently. Ethan seemed to understand, giving a nearly imperceptible nod. The police are on their way, Christopher bluffed, trying to keep Klein's attention. This is over, Klein. Then I have nothing to lose, Klein growled, starting to drag Ethan toward the deeper water. That was the moment Ethan chose to act. Following Amara's silent signal, he suddenly bit down hard on Klein's hand. The man yelped in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Ethan to wrench free. Run, Ethan, Amara shouted. The boy sprinted toward his father, but Klein recovered quickly. He lunged after Ethan, grabbing the back of his pajamas. Without hesitation, Amara threw herself at Klein, knocking him sideways. They both tumbled to the ground, rolling dangerously close to the water's edge. Amara, Christopher shouted, rushing forward after making sure Ethan was safely behind him. Klein was stronger, but Amara fought with the desperate strength of someone who had already lost a child to water once before. She would not let it happen again. Klein struck her across the face, momentarily stunning her. He scrambled to his feet, reaching for the gun holstered at his side. Enough, he snarled, aiming the weapon at Christopher, who had nearly reached them. Stay back or I'll shoot. Everything seemed to freeze. Christopher stopped mid-stride, his eyes fixed on the gun. Ethan whimpered from where he stood several yards away. And Amara, still on the ground, saw her chance. With Klein's attention on Christopher, she swept her leg out, knocking Klein's feet from under him. He fell backward with a surprised shout, the gun firing harmlessly into the air as he tumbled into the lake with a tremendous splash. Christopher rushed to Amara, helping her to her feet. Are you all right? Before she could answer, Klein surfaced, sputtering and cursing. He still had the gun, trying to aim it despite his soaked condition. A figure rushed past them, Victoria running straight toward Klein. Victoria, stop! Christopher called after her, but Victoria kept going, wading into the water toward Klein. You won't hurt them, she said, her voice suddenly steady. I won't let you hurt anyone else. Get back. Klein warned, the gun wavering in his wet hand. Victoria didn't stop. This ends now, Robert. I was a coward once. I won't be again. Everything happened so quickly. Klein raised the gun. Victoria lunged for his arm. There was a struggle, a shot ringing out across the water. Then both figures went still. Christopher waded into the lake, reaching them first. Klein was floating face down, a dark stain spreading in the water around him. Victoria was gasping, clutching her side where blood seeped between her fingers. Victoria, Christopher said, supporting his sister as he guided her back toward the shore. I'm sorry, she whispered, her face pale in the moonlight. I'm so sorry, Christopher, for everything. Amara had called 911 on Christopher's phone, and now she wrapped her arms around Ethan, shielding him from the scene. Help is coming, she assured the trembling boy. It's over now. You're safe. As they waited for the ambulance, Victoria's breathing grew more labored. Christopher cradled her in his arms, years of anger and betrayal momentarily set aside. I loved you, he told her, despite everything. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was protecting our legacy, but I destroyed it instead. The legacy isn't the company or the Monroe name, Christopher said softly. It's Ethan, it's family. Victoria's gaze shifted to Ethan, who was watching from the safety of Amara's arms. Ethan, she called weakly. I'm sorry, sweetheart, for what happened to your mother. For the fear you've lived with. Ethan hesitated, then moved closer, Amara at his side. Your mummy was brave, Victoria continued, her voice fading. She was trying to do the right thing. Like you did by finally telling the truth. Ethan nodded solemnly. The lady in the water told me to be brave. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. The lady in the water? Mommy, Ethan said simply. She wasn't scary anymore. She just wanted me to tell. Victoria closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. She was a better person than I ever gave her credit for. By the time the ambulance arrived, Victoria was unconscious. The paramedics worked quickly, loading her onto a stretcher. Another team confirmed that Klein was dead. The bullet had struck him in the chest during the struggle. As Victoria was wheeled toward the ambulance, Christopher turned to Amara and Ethan. "Go with her," Amara encouraged him. "We'll follow in your car." At the hospital, they waited together in the sterile brightness of the emergency room. Ethan eventually fell asleep across a row of chairs, exhausted by the night's events. Christopher and Amara sat side by side, their hands entwined. "I still can't believe it," Christopher said quietly. "All this time, Victoria knew. She let me believe it was an accident." "She thought she was protecting you," Amara said. "In her own twisted way, by covering up my wife's murder." Christopher shook his head. "That's not protection. That's control." Amara squeezed his hand. "People do terrible things when they're afraid of losing what matters to them. What mattered to me was Genevieve, Ethan. Not the company. Not the Monroe legacy." "Victoria couldn't see that," Amara said gently. "But in the end, she tried to make it right." A doctor approached them, his expression grave. "Mr. Monroe, I'm sorry, but your sister's injuries were too severe. She didn't make it." Christopher closed his eyes, a complex mixture of grief and anger washing over his face. "Thank you, doctor." When they were alone again, Amara held him as the tears finally came, for Genevieve, for Victoria, for the family that had been broken long before tonight. "What will happen now?" she asked when his tears had subsided. "The truth will come out," Christopher said firmly. "About Genevieve's murder, about the contamination on the factory site. All of it. The expansion project will be cancelled," Christopher said without hesitation. "I'll work with David Wilson to clean up the contamination properly." "It's what Genevieve would have wanted." Amara nodded, thinking of all the lives that would be saved by that decision. "Ethan will be proud when he's old enough to understand." Christopher looked over at his sleeping son. "He's already the bravest person I know." In the days that followed, the truth emerged piece by piece. The police reopened Genevieve's case, reclassifying it as a homicide. The environmental reports Genevieve had discovered were made public, leading to a major cleanup effort on the contaminated land. The Monroe name suffered, but Christopher didn't care. He focused instead on healing his sons, his own, and the land his family had harmed. 1 month after that terrible night by the lake, Amara stood in her room, packing her belongings. The door opened behind her, and she turned to find Christopher watching her. "You don't have to go," he said. Amara folded a sweater carefully. "I think it's for the best. Ethan is speaking freely now. He's healing. He doesn't need me anymore. What if I need you?" Christopher asked quietly. Amara looked up at him. "Christopher, I know it's too soon," he acknowledged. "After everything that's happened. But when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you. I came here running from my past," Amara reminded him, "from my guilt over Marcus. I'm not sure I'm ready to love again." Christopher finished for her. "Neither am I, not completely, but I'd like the chance to try. With you." Before she could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face falling when he saw her suitcase. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice small. Amara knelt down to his level. "I was thinking about it. Please don't go," Ethan pleaded. "I'll make the bad dreams stay away." "Your dad will be here for you," Amara assured him. "You don't need me for that anymore." Ethan looked at her seriously. "But we want you here." "Both of us. We do," Christopher confirmed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Amara looked between them, this man and this child who had somehow worked their way into her heart when she believed it was permanently broken. "Maybe I could stay a little longer," she conceded. "Not as the maid, though. As family," Ethan said decisively. "Like in my drawing," Christopher smiled. "We can figure out the details as we go. What matters is that we're together." "I'd like that," Amara admitted. "But there's somewhere I need to go first. Something I need to do." The following day, Christopher drove Amara and Ethan to a small cemetery in Atlanta. Amara carried a bouquet of white lilies as they walked among the headstones, until they reached a small marker with a teddy bear engraved above the name, Marcus Bell. Amara knelt, placing the flowers gently against the stone. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "I'm sorry it's been so long since I visited." Christopher and Ethan stood respectfully a few steps back, giving her space. Ethan, however, soon moved forward, kneeling beside her. "Is this your little boy?" he asked. Amara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, this is Marcus." Ethan placed a small toy car, one of his favorites, next to the flowers. "So he has something to play with," he explained. Amara wrapped an arm around the boy's shoulders, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "That's very kind, Ethan. Mommy says kids in heaven can see us," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "She tells me in my dreams sometimes. I bet Marcus can see you too." Christopher joined them, placing a steadying hand on Amara's shoulder as she struggled with her emotions. "Do you think," she began hesitantly, looking up at Christopher, "do you think it's possible that they watch over us?" "I do," Christopher said softly. "I think Genevieve led you to us, to help Ethan, to help all of us." Amara looked back at the grave of her son. "I'll always love you, Marcus," she whispered. "I'll always be your mommy. But I think maybe my heart is big enough to love Ethan too. I hope that's okay." A warm breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree shading the grave, sending dappled sunlight dancing across the marble. "I think he's saying yes," Ethan said solemnly. Amara smiled through her tears, drawing Ethan closer. Christopher knelt beside them, completing their circle. They remained there for a while, three broken people beginning to heal together. When they finally stood to leave, Amara felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Not an absence of grief, but grief transformed into something that could coexist with hope. Back at the Monroe estate, they walked together to the lake. It no longer seemed threatening in the bright afternoon sun. "I've been thinking," Christopher said, looking out over the water. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start. Somewhere new, without so many painful memories." "You'd leave the Monroe estate?" Amara asked, surprised. Christopher nodded. "This house, this lake, they've been a prison for Ethan, for me." "For too long. Where would we go?" Ethan asked, excited by the possibility. "Wherever we want," Christopher said, smiling down at his son. "We could build a new house somewhere with mountains, maybe. Or by the ocean." "Not by water," Ethan said quickly. "Not by water," Christopher agreed. Amara thought about it. A new beginning, a new home they would create together. "It sounds perfect." 6 months later, they stood on a hillside overlooking a valley of pine trees. Behind them, construction had begun on a modern, sun-filled house designed around Ethan's input, with big windows so the dreams can fly out. The Monroe Industries headquarters had been sold, with most of the proceeds going to environmental cleanup and a foundation established in Genevieve's name. Christopher now ran a much smaller company focused on sustainable building materials. "Do you ever miss it?" Amara asked him, as they watched Ethan exploring the woods nearby. "The empire, the Monroe legacy." Christopher shook his head. "That legacy was built on secrets and control. I want a different kind of legacy for Ethan, based on truth," Amara said. "And love," Christopher added, turning to face her. "Speaking of which," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Christopher," Amara breathed, her eyes widening. "I know it hasn't been that long," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "But when you know, you know." "And I know that I love you, Amara Bell. You brought light back into our lives when we were lost in darkness." Ethan came running back, grinning when he saw the ring. "Are you asking Amara to be my new mom?" he asked his father excitedly. Christopher laughed. "I'm asking her to marry me, yes. Say yes," Ethan urged, jumping up and down. "Please, please, please." Amara looked from the eager little boy to the man watching her with love and hope in his eyes. She thought of Marcus, of Genevieve, of the painful journey that had somehow led her here, to this moment, to this family that needed her as much as she needed them. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." Christopher slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close for a kiss. Ethan threw his arms around both of them, completing their embrace. Later that evening, as Ethan slept peacefully in his temporary bedroom in the rental cottage they were using until their new home was completed, Amara stood on the porch looking up at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," Christopher said, joining her with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I was thinking about how life can surprise you," Amara said, accepting the mug gratefully. "A year ago I was broken, running from my past, taking a job as a maid just to survive. And now? Now I'm planning a wedding, helping design a home, being a mother again." She turned to him, her eyes shining in the porch light. "I never thought I'd have another chance at happiness. Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead us exactly where we need to be," Christopher said, putting an arm around her shoulders. From inside the house they heard Ethan's voice. "Daddy, Amara!" They found him sitting up in bed, not frightened but wide awake. "What is it, buddy?" Christopher asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I had a dream," Ethan said. "About Mommy and Marcus." Amara tensed slightly. "What kind of dream?" "A good one," Ethan assured her. They were in a garden with lots of flowers. Mommy was wearing a white dress and she was holding Marcus's hand. He looked up at Amara. "Marcus has your smile." Tears sprang to Amara's eyes. "What else?" "Mommy said they're okay, and that it's okay for us to be happy now." Ethan yawned, settling back against his pillows. "She said to tell you both thank you for finding the truth." Christopher and Amara exchanged a look of wonder as Ethan drifted back to sleep. "Do you think—" Amara whispered. Christopher squeezed her hand. "I think our children are at peace. And now we can be too." As they quietly left Ethan's room, Amara felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. She had arrived at the Monroe estate broken, hiding from her past. Now she was leaving it whole, embracing a future she never could have imagined. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance across the sky. Somewhere, Amara liked to think, Genevieve and Marcus were watching, smiling, at peace. And here in this moment, she, Christopher, and Ethan were building something new together, a family forged from loss and pain. But now growing strong in love and truth, the millionaire's son had found his voice again. And in helping him speak, Amara had found her own voice too, and the courage to love once more. The end.